Hi, good morning, everyone. So most of the friends call me CJ, so you can just call me CJ as well. I'm from PALO Networks, and for the next 15 minutes, what I'm going to share with you is a cloud security strategy, right? So, but before we really came into what is the problems, I mean, we really need to understand what's the problems, what caused the chaos, right? It's really about three things. Number one is hyper innovations. Cloud adoptions, right? Digital transform, right? And then the second thing is about evolve of the attacks. So we heard about a lot of attacks, a lot of malwares this morning. And of course, one more thing is actually is economy, the headwind. It's really about all these three things combined together, create a big challenge, which is far beyond what is our legacy security approach can take. All right, so for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about what is the better strategy and architecture to deal with the challenge we have. Now, let's step back a little bit and to understand what is a real risk we have encountered today. What's the top risk we need to handle? Right. Number one, open source vulnerabilities. Number two, infrastructure misconfigurations. Malware, over-permissive access, and last but not least, insecure API. So this is the top 5 risks that we consistently hearing from the customers and validating the customer as well. I really encourage you to take note on this one and think about how to design a proper architecture to deal with this risk. All right, now we understand the risk. Now, what is the design principle for address the risk? It's really about 5 design principles. Okay, first things, prevention first. You got to have a prevention first strategy. Only have the visibility is not enough. You need to have a preventive control to stop the bad things when an attack happens. And second thing is DevSecOps integrations, right? So we heard about in this morning, the DevOps process is heavily being used in the cloud native environments, and secure the supply chain, secure the infrastructure security code, secure your the template, detect a secret. That's one of the most important things that you need to do from the cloud security perspective. So DevOps integration is one of the key principles you need to think about. Now, the third thing is prioritize a risk. Cloud environment is very diverse. You will receive a lot of events, a lot of trails, a lot of logs from everywhere. How can you understand what is the risk from all these logs? How can you do analysis on the attack path and prioritize the first things you need to do is one of the key things you need to think about to do the cloud security design. The last two here is actually quite straightforward, consolidations and scalability. So I'll talk about the consolidation first. I got a chance to talk to many of the customers, and there's a common feedback that I have is I have a lot of tools. And there's a lot of tools actually doesn't integrate it together, and it's quite challenging for me to operate these tools. I'm looking into the consolidations to simplify it and make it more integrated and cost-effective. Right? So consolidations is one of the things you could consider as a design principle. Last but not least, scalabilities. Right? That's a very important thing. Now, so we understand the principle and how to apply this particular principle into the architecture. And this is how it looks like from a cloud architecture perspective. Right? So regardless of you're going using AWS, or GCP, or using Azure, you probably will be end up into that environments. Either you are running applications in the virtual machines, running into the self-hosted container, or maybe managed container or serverless. But from the component perspective, it is really about 3 key components you need to think about from the security perspective. The first thing is the infrastructure security. Control plane, you need to secure that one. And this is the visibility and the control came into the picture. So you need to looking into how can you control the misconfiguration, how can you control the over-permissive access, right? And this is the part you will be able to apply risk prioritizations, design principle. Now, the second point is runtime. Right, so after secure the infrastructure control plane, then your application is going to run on top of that infrastructure. And the runtime defense becomes very important. And this is the place where you secure on what is the prevention first strategy. So things like preventing the malware, things like preventing the insecure API, stopped later movement, stopped C2 the executions are all follow this particular category. Now there's a third component here, which is we call shift left. Because the DevOps is heavily being used to build your cloud environments and run your applications, right? So how can you do a DevSecOps integration is one of the key things you should look at, which is happening here, right? If you add all these things together, this is where in the morning we heard about CNAPP. CNAPP stands for Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. And that is exactly the CNAPP's cover. All right. Now, what's a Prisma Cloud? Prisma Cloud is a CNAPP platform to provide a comprehensive CNAPP capability. Okay, simple as that. And from a category perspective, the Prisma Cloud CNAPP platforms contain three portions. The first part, visibility and control. This is where you do infrastructure, cloud infrastructure security, right? Do the, visibility and control, compliance, the governance, all apply here. The CSPMs, CIEM, you have heard about that. This actually well is the scope of that visibility and control. Now on the right side here is a runtime defense, right? So this is well is the cloud workload protections, web application security is actually come into that categories. On the left side, which is is the risk preventions. So this is is the part you do a proactive address the issue, which is we call DevSecOps integration. So that's is the Prisma Cloud entire portfolio. Now you may be wondering, hey, the CNAPP platform covering so much broad areas. There are so many capabilities here. How can I get into that? How can I have the adoption journey into that cloud security maturity? So this is typically what we are seeing from what its customers being adopt. We constantly seeing customers start from the visibility and the control, which makes sense, right? Because you want to secure your infrastructure and make sure your infrastructure is under the governance, under the compliance, and make sure that is safer, right? And then we're seeing the customer after that, they will be moving to runtime protections. So is actually start deploy the application on that and protect the applications. But I do see the customers having visibility control and runtime defense activated at the same time. Now, after you implement a phase one, we are seeing organizations that shift to the left because that makes sense because there's many things you can do a compliance and a governance, but actually you cannot prevent the user doing a misbehavior. So how can you prevent for that? The most effective way is a shift left to compliance and governance on the source. That's where the shift left happens. And of course, after that, integration with SOC is actually one of the key things that you should look after because automations, orchestrations is one of the very important things that you should look for. All right. Now, I really want to call out one of the use case, and this is one of the use cases perfectly match on what we are talking about in the previous slide. I would like to use day 0, day 1, day 2 as simplified terms. For those who first time heard about day 0, day 1, day 2, day 0 means design and develop. Day 1 means is deployment and runtime. Day 2, of course, security operation. So what are the key concept here is you got to standardize your DevOps process. You got to standardize your deployment process. All right. So once that has been standardized, and you need to do a codified of your application's requirements. To build the infrastructure as a code, to build a policy as a code, to build a compliance as a code. Right. And once that has been stored into a repository, what's the next step? Apply the compliance, apply the governance into that code, and make sure you have one of the outcome, and this outcome is only compliance resources is get deployed. And anything is non-compliance is going to stop and roll back. Right? So once that has happened, you are pretty much able to make sure your deployments in that particular runtime is going to be pretty much according to the security best practice. So what is the next is to do a continually monitoring and preventing bad things happen, which is on the day one operations. And only have the day one operation and the day zero operation secure is not enough, because you need to be able to integrate all these two into the day two operation, which is a security operation. And that's where is the alert and events being generated from monitoring and detect. The only difference here is we are not going to be blindly sending all the logs into the SOT, because you are going to do handling, you are going to do a processing, and only the alert matters sending to the SOT. And this is going to be significantly improve the efficiency of your SOT. And of course, automations can be applied, such as like SAW, and you can have the playbooks, you can have the metadata to be pulled out from the platforms to enrich the data and trigger all kind of the automation. And in the end, there's the most important things that you should need to think about. It's a feedback loop to your day zero to enhance your compliance and the governance, right? And of course, you can feedback to the day one to do a remediation. Now, let's give a summarize on. We have been talking about quite a few points. So, what's the key things we should look at? First things, security is a team sport. Okay, so think about your security team, think about your security operation team, think about your DevOps team, think about your engineering teams, CCOE, developer, everyone has to be work together to complete this cloud security journey. So that's number one. So number two, reduce the complexity. Complexity is the enemy of the security. So reduce the complexity with the platform approach. So number three, you can use the security tools which is friendly for the cloud native developments, right? You should not introduce the tools which can completely change your development life cycles. That is bad, okay? And then number four, we talk about a lot of automation. Why is that? Because the attacker is using automation. Attacker is using the AI. You cannot fight with the machine with a human. You have to fight machine with machine. So automation is very, very key. Last but not least, get the visibility for the multi-cloud. And then you should plan and design for the multi-cloud. Guess what? A lot of customers are visiting and they say, okay, I'm using a single cloud because I want to do that cloud first before I move to the next. And you end up with a multi-cloud because you will be forced to use a multi-cloud in a certain case. There's a certain service only available on a certain kind of cloud. And one more point I really want to highlight here, shift left is very important. Shift left is going to be significantly improve your cloud posture and reduce your cloud security friction, right? I mentioned about scalability. Okay, so this is my last slide. So scalability is very important when you came into the design. All right, so being one of the design principles as scalabilities, you should plan to scale your business of the today and in the future, right? So with that, I would like to thank you for your time and attention. Thank you so much.